Rain Dogs is a British series airing on HBO about a woman and her daughter struggling to survive on no income, no prospects, and no place to stay. Despite the massively depressing circumstances, the show works as a situational comedy because its characters are impervious to shame and absurd enough not to get bogged down in their own problems. On this podcast, we like to discuss the most recent installment of a different series every show. The pilot of Rain Dogs is titled It's Hard to Be a Saint in the City. It's March 11th, and you're listening to today's episode.
I have a list of 8 questions here. I want to see if you can answer them in under 30 seconds. It's about the show, mostly about your feelings of it. There's a couple things here and there, but are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, you're going to have to remember your answers, but here we go. All right, starting now. What other show is this most like?
Shameless.
Okay, what is the club that Daisy asks if she can work at that night called?
Oh, like X, I don't know.
The show is described as a dramedy. Is it more drama or more comedy?
It's like equal both.
Who was your favorite character?
Tough. Iris?
Who would you recommend this show most to?
I would recommend the show most to anyone who's a fan of British comedies.
Did you recognize anyone in the cast, and could you name where they're from?
I thought at first that the main character was Rose's mom from Doctor Who, but she wasn't, so no.
Okay, the 30 seconds are up. The last 2 I had was true or false. This is based on a true story.
It feels like Smilf in that way, where it could be, but See, it's just so mean to the main characters that I maybe know.
Okay, and then my last one was describe this show in just one word.
I want to redirect my previous answer and say it probably is based on a true story, but it's like been exaggerated maybe a bit. And then what's the last question?
Describe this show in just one word.
In one word. Absurd?
Okay. So, what other show is this most like?
I said Smilf and Shameless.
Okay, and do you have any similarities between the two of them?
Sure, but I kind of have to get into the plot to explain that.
Okay.
But the overall tone is a lot like Brassic, a lot like any British sitcom that's out, or not sitcom, but you know what I'm saying.
I want to read you the synopsis for Rain Dogs, and then I have another synopsis that I think it kind of fits with a different TV show. Rain Dogs, an extraordinary tale of a mother's love for her daughter. It explores a dysfunctional family on the fringes of society, attempting to go straight in a crooked world. Mm-hmm. Now, Outrageous Fortune synopsis reads as such. When career criminal Wolfgang West gets put away for 4 years, his wife Cheryl decides it's time for her family to go straight, but can the West change the habits of a lifetime? That stars a very young Anthony Starr. I think he came out in 2005. It seems like those shows are pretty similar in comparison.
I feel like this is a lot more grounded because it's not dealing with a full criminal enterprise. Wasn't that whole family in Outrageous?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah, they kind of were all...
They were all part of a big criminal network, and that the mom was the leader of. This isn't nearly as crime driven. This is basically about this one lady, and she does commit a few misdemeanors, I would say, in this episode. But other than that, it's not like she's dealing drugs off the side of the street or anything.
Well, something you don't know is that I also watched the pilot to this episode.
I actually did know that because I saw on my HBO account that you had moved the thing
across. So that gets away the surprise. I was surprised to see why it was called Rain Dogs. I didn't really understand. Apparently, it's named after a Tom Waits song.
No rain, no dogs. But yeah,
let's just get into the plot. What's this show really about? Break it down.
Well, you saw it, so you can help me out. But there's Costello Jones and her daughter Iris, and the first thing we see is them getting evicted from their flat by a few repo men at the door. And then when they finally do leave the flat, we get sent over to a completely different storyline that I wasn't expecting, because I knew that Costello and Iris were going to be the main two because they're on the cover. I didn't know Selby was going to be in the show. So when they went over to a prison and they had this guy who was packing up, getting ready to go, kind of like American Gigolo, it's his day to leave, and his roommate's there saying he expects to be paid back for all the protection he's given him over the last year. And then the guy just kind of blows him off in the end.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's going to come back to bite him. It seems kind of like Selby doesn't care about much. He does care about Costello and her daughter, though.
I did like his introductory scenes. He kind of has 2 introductory scenes. He has that one in the prison, and then you see him also interact with Iris later on. He started off being my favorite character, but he just turned into such a strange character as time went on.
Well,
his moral compass seems to be all
I don't know what
rigid.
his relation is, and you're not supposed to in the first episode, to Costello and her daughter, but we do know that they're extremely close. He could be Iris's dad, but it's unlikely he would have to be bisexual. He's very into dudes, it seems like. In this episode, he was shown using a glory hole in a public restroom at one point, and yet he comes from money. He is a strange character, I give you that. But then we see Costello and Iris. They take a taxi to drop Iris off at school, but since they have no money, Iris fakes being sick so that they can ditch at the last second. And you can see Costello does feel a little bad about it because, again, the taxi driver did nothing wrong. Yeah. But everybody calls each other twat all the time, and that's just an English thing, and so that's what happens. Selby and Costello are clearly not the most admirable folks, but you can tell that they're like deep down good people, and I think that's what you get across in the first few minutes.
It was shot in England, but like a lot of it seemed like it reminded me a lot of London. I visited that back in November, and just seeing especially the places where like Selby would walk in between alleyways and they had all those lights hung up and just all the building and architecture was something that was kind of nostalgic for me, and I really like the fact that they were able to shoot there.
There weren't any like public locations that people, like touristy locations?
No, I don't think so.
Not in this one. No. They did have a public telephone booth, which you don't see here in the States very often, a Banksy booth, where Gloria is passed out in there, but I'm getting ahead. So Costello is dodging Selby's calls, and that's when she goes to look for Gloria because she needs a place to stay with her daughter, and Gloria isn't home. Her car is out on the street and her phone is inside the car, so she's not able to contact, or Costello isn't able to contact her friend in any way. And we find out that Gloria is in West London and she meets an old man with an oxygen tank who also knows Costello, and he helps her up. But then we never see her again.
Yeah, it was such a strange introductory. It was like, I was wondering why they decided to introduce her in the pilot episode if
she'll show up later on. And she's mentioned a lot more than she's actually shown. But Selby, I wonder if Selby knows Gloria. He probably does.
Yeah,
he knows everything about her life. Mm-hmm. For instance, like Selby, even though he's been in prison for a full year, knows Iris's schedule so well that he's able to go to the park that she's hanging out with her class and give her money and say, don't tell your mom I gave you this because she's dodging my call, blah, 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 blah. And so Iris has some money there. Costello, at the same time, can't even afford chips when she goes to a local
store. That's what it is.
Costello can't even afford chips as she goes to a local like mini mart. Nikki, the store clerk, knows her, starts shaming her for being kicked out of her apartment and not having a job. And then this poor looking bloke takes pity on Costello, buys her the chips, and then says, you can stay in my studio apartment as long as you need with your daughter. Now, there is little overtone that this guy might be a little shady, but at the same time, it's like he's mostly nice.
But but that was the thing. To me, he was completely shady because it was like, who would just decide to give up part of their apartment for that out of kind of nowhere?
I don't know. They sort of tried to make him seem like he had a disability of sorts. So
yeah, that's true.
Possibly he was just out of the kindness of his own heart. And then when she went over to view the studio apartment, he also said the last mom who stayed here, like he'd done this several times, like a foster type situation, that she'd been there for a while. So it wasn't one of those things that she should be concerned about because who would stay there a long time if they were being abused or anything. Costello realizes she needs money really badly. She tries to get into work like you were talking about. By the way, what was the name of the place that she tried to get into?
Fleshpot.
Okay, so it's some form of cam/brothel area. And the attendant or the guy who was in charge there used the best line. He was like, don't shit in my mouth and tell me it's a Big Mac, when she was like trying to get a shift. But she doesn't, and then she has to go meet Selby in a public restroom because she needs the money that bad. And that's when she sees that Selby's working a glory hole. It doesn't seem to faze her at all. And Selby doesn't give her money there, but they do have a nice little like.
That was very strange to me because
he doesn't want to admit that he's already given the daughter some, and he has an allowance that he gets from his mom. Again, he comes from money, so I don't know why he's like intermingled with this weird crowd.
The tone reminded me and I think you might have even said it earlier, of Skins, but like a bleaker version. I feel like people that watched Skins when it was on and like continually like that show even years after it ended, I feel like they would like this show as well, even though I feel like it's more depressing in this one, but I don't know.
It depends on the episode you're watching, but once Costello realizes, okay, I can't rely on anything now, I have to go and check out this new guy's apartment, and so she sees that it's a really tiny cupboard that her and her daughter would be staying in. They call it a cupboard, it's really just like a small closet.
Yeah, it was a very small closet.
Yeah. And so she's like, I'll let you know. She goes, picks up her daughter from school. They go back to Gloria's, see she's still not there. Then they try to sleep in the laundromat, and the guy tells them they can't stay there. And then she breaks into Gloria's car so that her and her daughter can hang out. And that's when Iris admits Selby gave her some money. So they go and they buy scratch-off tickets, lottery tickets, to see if they can win more money. And it seems like they're winning. They win 20 quid, and they only need 20 more to get a hotel. Then they do the flash cut to them having to stay at the shady guy's apartment. And at first, it seems like it's perfectly fine. The guy's doing, being nice. But then as soon as the daughter goes to bed, that's when he takes out the pink dress, and he's like, you got to put this on. And then it just gets worse from there. He tries to, solicit sex from her. She traps herself in the closet and calls up Selby and says, I need your protection again. Because apparently when Selby went to jail originally, it was because he beat up a dude nearly to death. And I think it was on behalf of Costello.
Oh, yeah.
So,
it had to have been.
So this is a similar situation. Selby, on the other hand, has been hanging out in some Chinese gambling business for the last however many hours and just winning and winning and winning. He's really good at this game.
I didn't figure out what the game was, but I recognized it. From Crazy Rich Asians.
Really?
They played in that as well, yeah.
It wasn't Pachinko, and because that would have been Korean, right? But it also reminded me of the Shameless episode, the U.S. Shameless episode, where Frank is so drunk and he goes downstairs and he ends up winning a ton of money in some weird gambling Chinese game that he didn't even know how to play. Anyways, so Selby has a ton of money now. He goes and beats up the perv at the apartment, the flat, and then they leave and they go back to the original flat that Costello and her daughter had been kicked out of at the beginning. So come full circle.
They literally break in.
But yeah, and it kind of reminded me of This Fool, because that's exactly what they do when the main guy, the owner of the Hugs Not Thugs business, needed to get back into his apartment. They just broke a window. But so they break into the door, and that's when I think Selby puts the tracker on her phone. Because he wants to make sure he knows where she is at all time. And that dynamic is just so strange. They're friends. They might be more than friends. They might be family, but
they might even be frenemies, it seems like, in certain
But he
aspects.
just cares so much for Iris, and Selby doesn't really seem to have and Costello doesn't really seem to have a problem with that. So that means that he might be the father.
In that respect, Selby and Iris, and even Costello and Iris, that both their relationship with Iris reminds me a lot of Mr. In-Between. How Mr. In-Between, or the main character of that, Ray, his relationship with his daughter, it's kind of the same, where it's like Iris is pretty smart to be, what is she, 10 years old or something like that? And even the actress said that she's kind of playing the mom in this show, even though...
The more mature role?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's interesting with Mr. In-Between, he's also a very cynical character. Mm-hmm. He's also one who's seen everything. And he's also trying to be better, right?
Yeah, and he is like Selby in a way, because nothing phases him. He could get shot at and he wouldn't really care.
Yeah, so Selby leaves, and that's when the police arrive. But this time, Selby has left her with the thousands of dollars or quid that she needs to pay off the landlord.
I think it was $3,000.
I don't know if you can get away with that. Once you've already been evicted, if you can just pay the money and expect it to...
It seemed like it worked here. It was very strange to me.
Well, they cut out right as she opened the mail flap and was like, what the fuck do you guys want? But she has the money, so it feels like even if they get kicked out again, they could just go to a hotel for the night or a bed and breakfast or something. But yeah, that's where it leaves you. 30 minutes, a lot gets done. I was pleasantly surprised. I felt like this pilot achieved what it set out to do, even better than Smilf, which I do know was based off Frankie Shaw's real life. I assume this is based off someone's real life.
Well, as you said, you actually kind of hit the nail on the head, because it is mostly true. This pilot was based off of Cash Caraway. She's the executive producer, the creator. It was also this episode, at least it's ran by her. She published one book in 2019. It was a memoir, and she's written 3, I think, plays. But that book literally was part of a bidding war, and I think HBO Max ended up getting that book. It was under the name Skint Estate, and basically, the main character is based off of her. I don't think it was as drastic as what this episode showed, but she did have to do some similar things. She was living a lot in poverty. But then what happened was they decided to try and adapt Skint Estate, and they ended up scrapping it because Cash Caraway was like, you know what, I'm just going to make this show instead, Rain Dogs. And the reason why it was called Fleshpot, I was glad to see it was a little bit of an Easter egg in there, is because originally she was going to write another, I'm not sure if it was going to be a memoir or sequel to the book called Fleshpot, talking about like the town that she lived in, and then she decided to scrap that as well, making this show. But I found it very interesting. Also, Daisy Mae Cooper, the main character, Costello, she, I think, also talked about how she connected with the character because when she was 20, her brothers and her were cleaners, and she talked about how she didn't even have transportation.
It reminded me a lot of Maid, too, but like Maid was a much more serious version, but also based off the real life of someone.
I saw people refer to this as kind of the UK Maid.
I feel like this is, again, more comedy-driven, and the daughter's much older. Like, in Maid, she had to deal with a baby the whole time, and she's much younger as a parent. In this, how old is the main character? I think she's in her mid-30s or something.
Yeah, around there. I know Daisy Mae Cooper. You might know her from Avenue 5. She was in season 1 and season 2.
No, she's the one who, like, fell, right?
Sarah, that's the name that she has. The ship's bridge crew.
She's the one who she had a twin sister who was, like, frozen.
Yeah,
and then she's the one who, like, fell in the second season.
I didn't even pick that up until now.
That's crazy because she plays such a dumb character.
Well, not only that, she's also mostly known for a show called This Country. You wouldn't know that show, but you might know the American remake, which was Welcome to Flash. And if I remember correctly, I think Daisy Mae Cooper even worked with her dad on This Country. Like, she acted pair and pair with him.
Yeah.
You also have people like...
Do you remember Rose's mom from Doctor Who? Do you see where I got that, like,
yes.
comparison?
Yeah.
She looked a little... But I knew that she was too young to be the same person. I was going to
say, yeah.
Because that came out, like, what, 18 years ago?
2005 or something. Yeah. And then you have Gloria. She's been in things like Doctor Who, Cuckoo, Alex Rider, even the episode that you watched, and then also big movies as well, like Christopher Robin and Ready Player One. No, Gloria, the person that we
Gloria
got the one scene from.
No, you were saying her name in the show is Gloria Cooper. Yes.
The thing I found interesting was the director, Richard Laxton. He's directed a lot of things, Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, The Mist, and other TV shows, but he's most known, and I want to see if you can guess the connection here. He's most known for directing 25 episodes of Him and Her. It's like that was the show that he's most known for, and I know that you saw that. Like, do you see the similarities between the two? Because Him and Her just took place in like one setting, right?
Yeah, again, British humor, but other than that, not entirely. The guy who was the perv reminded me of someone. Like, I felt like I'd seen that guy before.
I didn't get anything on him. I think he's only in the first episode.
Yeah,
for this.
But I think I've seen him in some other British series at some point. He played a good job of going from like, oh, I'm a nice guy to like, oh, you should stay away from this fellow.
No, I agree with that. Before I get into the
I give it an 8
ratings. You give it an 8?
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I liked it, and I think it has legs behind it. Like, I think it could go on for a little bit.
I was going to give this show like a high 7 because I thought some parts of the episodes worked while other parts were kind of slow. But I really thought about it, and I was like, this is a pretty original premise for a TV show, so I will push your 8 as well. And it seems like the show has gotten a lot of critical acclaim from big publications. IMDb can't really tell it as like a 7 over like 100 reviews or so.
This feels like a show that just went under the radar that like no one will hear about, and it probably will just maybe get 2 seasons or something. But like I don't know how it would get heard about.
Well, the Daily Beast even said it's HBO's new sleeper hit, saying there's a new surprise at every turn, and that's more focused on making sure its characters find a foot forward. And I know that all the...
she also reaches 100 days sober by the end of the episode.
Right.
We didn't even talk about that. But yeah, that was also impressive for the character, and the daughter was happy, and it will be tragic if that breaks.
I know it's going to be 8 episodes, and I think that the critics were given the whole season, and they say themselves just like everywhere. The Rolling Stones, Hollywood Reporter, even Time said it was superb and described Costello and Selby as the most compelling characters they've encountered this year on any TV show.
You're saying that the 6.9 on IMDb isn't reflective because it isn't based off enough reviews.
Yeah, the 6.9 was from yesterday. It had changed to a 7, but it has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's part of the reason why I decided to watch the show, because originally I was just going to do research for it, but I was like, so many major publications are talking about how good the show is. I wanted to check it out for myself, and I think other people should too, because I believe it is pretty good.
All right, thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.